At 5:14 local time, the first radar return appears on the screen, then another, then 3 more. Inside the carrier's operations center, the radar display lights up with 5 fast-moving surface contacts racing north through the Strait of Hormuz. Their signatures are small, but their speed is not. They sit low against the water, almost impossible to pick out with the naked eye, but the system catches them immediately. Steady bearing, closing range, loose formation at first, then tighter. A watchstander leans closer to the console, eyes fixed on the screen. 5 fast surface contacts, closing fast. Above them, on the flight deck, the morning had started like any other. Crewmen moved through the familiar rhythm of the day. A faint trace of jet fuel hung in the air. The sea looked calm enough to seem harmless. Pale gray light stretched across the water, turning the horizon into a hard line of steel. Then the alert tone sounds, not disorder, not confusion. Just that sharp, unmistakable signal that tells every sailor nearby something has changed. On the bridge, heads turn toward starboard. Binoculars rise, the carrier stays on course. For now, a ship this large does not react suddenly. It does not move without purpose. So the first response is not a turn. It is confirmation. Down in CIC, the tracks refresh again. Speed increasing, course steady, closest point of approach shrinking. Another voice comes over the net, calm and precise. Recommend classification. No one jumps to conclusions. Not yet. In waters like these, assumptions can be dangerous. Fishing boats drift. Local traffic cuts across lanes. Civilian vessels sometimes behave unpredictably in crowded maritime corridors. But civilian boats usually do not approach at this speed, from this angle, in a 5-vessel pattern aimed toward the outer edge of a U.S. carrier formation. And that detail matters. Because this is not just a ship. It is a floating airfield wrapped in steel, surrounded by escorts designed to protect it long before anything gets close. Around the carrier, the defensive screen begins to adjust. One destroyer on the outer ring starts sliding across the water, shifting its position by a few degrees, then a few more. Nothing dramatic, nothing rushed, just enough to place itself between the fast boats and the carrier's exposed flank. Quiet authority, controlled geometry. Below deck, the tactical picture becomes sharper. Optical systems come online. Long-range cameras cut through the morning haze. Infrared overlays lock into place. One by one, the contacts begin to take shape. Narrow hulls, raised bows, fast patrol profiles. Heavy spray breaking off both sides as they drive through the chop. Then the confirmation comes. Iranian-type fast boats. No one needs to hear it twice. The Strait of Hormuz is narrow enough to turn a bad decision into a serious incident within seconds. There is no open ocean here. No comfortable distance. One aggressive maneuver in this tight waterway can shift a tense intercept into something far more dangerous before most of the flight deck even understands what is happening. On the bridge, the captain studies the horizon through magnified glass, then lowers it. Track them, log everything, no assumptions. That is the order. Not because the risk is small, because it is real. Now the 5 boats are visible without optics. Against the massive size of the carrier, they look small at first, almost insignificant. But small craft can be deceptive in confined waters. They move quickly, they turn even faster, and if they are equipped for confrontation, they can force a captain into a split-second decision no one wants to make too late. The lead boat shifts slightly left. 2 others widen out, opening the pattern. The last pair hold back just enough to suggest discipline. Inside CIC, an operator zooms in on the lead craft and freezes the frame. Exposed crew. Forward mount. Possible heavy equipment. Still, no one overreacts. That is the difference between a trained crew and an unsettled one. The carrier holds steady. The escorts continue shifting. Across the formation, defensive teams quietly take their positions. Covers come off. Tracking systems align. Somewhere on an escort, a CIWS mount rotates a few degrees and stops. Enough to be noticed, not enough to push the moment further. That is how naval power speaks in a place like this. Precision, posture, control. At 5:16, the distance closes again, fast. The boats are no longer simply approaching the formation, they are testing it. Their wakes stretch long and white behind them, clear even in the angled light of dawn. They are riding hard now, bows lifting, engines committed, no sign of drifting, loitering, or uncertainty. Whatever this is, it is deliberate. A voice from surface tracking reports without emotion. CPA continuing to shrink. A brief pause follows. Then another update comes in, quieter than the last, but far more serious. Lead contact is now on direct intercept geometry. On the flight deck, sailors turn and look over the edge. Even from that height, the speed is impossible to miss. The boats are moving so fast now that they look out of place against the quiet sea, cutting low across the water like dark streaks over glass. For a moment, the captain says nothing. Then he gives the order. Standby warnings. The carrier still holds steady. It does not turn away. It does not rush. But all around it, the formation begins to come alive. And ahead of them, 5 Iranian fast boats continue driving straight toward a U.S. aircraft carrier. At 5:17 local time, the first warning is sent. The voice is calm, controlled, and professional. Unidentified fast craft. This is a United States Navy warship operating in international waters. You are approaching a U.S. naval formation at unsafe speed and bearing. Alter course immediately. The message goes out across open maritime channels and fades into the morning air. No answer. Inside the carrier's combat information center, no one looks surprised. The 5 boats are still inbound. Their tracks are now solid on the display. No wandering course, no hesitation, no sign of confusion. What first looked like a possible surface contact has become something far more deliberate. The formation is too organized. The timing is too precise. These are not civilian boats that accidentally drifted into the wrong place. This looks coordinated. A second warning is sent. Shorter this time, sharper, more direct, still nothing. No broken reply, no static-filled response, no attempt to explain, just silence. And in the Strait of Hormuz, silence from fast-approaching military craft is not meaningless. It is its own message. On the bridge, the captain keeps his eyes forward. He does not raise his voice. He does not add drama to the moment. He watches the encounter unfold the way naval officers are trained to read it. Speed, bearing, intent, distance, time. One escort begins moving farther out from the screen, tightening the angle between itself and the approaching boats. Another ship behind it adjusts only slightly, just enough to protect the carrier's outer lane without making the whole formation look disrupted. From above, the movement would barely stand out. Inside the tactical picture, it is exact. 5 small boats against a carrier strike group sounds uneven. In open water, it is. But in a narrow maritime corridor, fast craft create a different kind of pressure. They do not need to overpower a carrier. They only need to force quick decisions inside a space where every second matters. And that is what is happening now. The camera feed sharpens. The lead Iranian boat is riding high, slamming hard between the swells. 2 others widen slightly behind it, opening space to the sides. The final pair hold back just enough to show control rather than disorder. This is not a random rush. It is a pattern. A surface warfare officer studies the feed and says what everyone is already thinking. Coordinated swarm profile. Above them, the flight deck begins to change. At first, the shift is almost invisible. A small group of crew clears a lane. A tow tractor moves aside. Deck teams begin working faster, but not louder. Near the edge of the deck, an MH-60 Seahawk is moved closer to launch readiness. Rotor blades are unlocked. Ground crew move around it with practice speed, the kind that comes from repetition, not panic. No one needs an explanation. The carrier is creating options. At 5:18, one of the Iranian boats surges slightly ahead of the others, just enough to become the front edge of the formation. Lead contact increasing speed, CIC reports, now separating from group. The range drops again. A third warning is transmitted in standard maritime command cadence, then repeated for clarity. The message leaves no room for misunderstanding. Alter course, reduce speed, remain clear of the formation. Still no response. Instead, the boats continue pressing in. The destroyer screening the carrier's flank increases speed. Whitewater churns harder behind its stern. It is no longer simply holding position. It is shaping the space around the carrier, placing itself between the incoming craft and the ship it is there to protect. Inside the escort, defensive teams are now fully at their stations. Systems are checked. Tracking optics stay locked on the approaching boats. No one has acted beyond posture. No one has crossed the final line. But that line is becoming thinner. Then the electronic warfare teams begin detecting low-level signals from the Iranian craft. Not a targeting signal, not a full control system. Something lighter, surface search behavior. Passive observation mixed with short active sweeps. They're scanning the formation, someone says. That changes the feel of the encounter. The boats are no longer simply closing distance. They are watching, measuring, and reading the carrier group while moving directly toward it. On the bridge, the captain receives the update and gives a single nod. Document all emissions. Hold formation. That order says everything. Do not flinch. Do not overreact. Do not give them the reaction they may be trying to provoke. At 5:19, the boats are close enough that sailors along the outer decks can see movement on board without magnification. Dark figures, helmets, arms braced against fixed mounts. On the lead boat, one man is visible near the bow, crouched low, one hand gripping what appears to be a forward-mounted position. The distance between both sides is shrinking fast. What had been a distant radar contact only minutes earlier now feels close, physical, and impossible to ignore. The boats are no longer symbols on a screen. They are real hulls cutting through real water toward one of the most valuable ships afloat. Then the lead craft makes its move. It angles inward by a few degrees, tightening its path toward the outer screen of the carrier formation. Inside CIC, the watch team catches it instantly. Lead contact has altered course. A beat later, the confirmation follows. Direct intercept geometry confirmed. No one raises their voice. No one needs to. The warnings have already been sent. The radios worked. The message was clear. And still, 5 Iranian fast boats continue closing on a U.S. aircraft carrier. At 5:20 local time, the helicopter lifts. The MH-60 Seahawk rises from the deck in a burst of rotor wash and salt spray. Its nose dips forward almost as soon as its wheels leave the non-skid surface. Below, the carrier maintains course. No sudden turn, no dramatic burst of speed. Just a massive wall of steel, moving exactly where it intended to move before the 5 boats appeared. That steadiness sends its own message. The U.S. Navy is not moving out of fear. It is moving with control. The Seahawk drops low over the water and pushes toward the outer screen, where the destroyer has already placed itself at the center of the encounter. From the cockpit, the picture becomes clear immediately. 5 Iranian fast boats, narrow hulls, high speed, white wakes trailing behind them like sharp cuts across the sea. What looked tense from the carrier looks even more serious from above. They are not scattering. They are converging. Visual tally, 5 fast craft, the pilot reports, continuing inbound. Formation intact. Inside the carrier's operations center, the tactical picture updates with every call from the helicopter. Range, bearing, speed, spacing. A second overlay follows the screening destroyer, now positioned directly between the carrier and the lead boat. Its wake spreads wider behind it, a heavy churn across the surface like a boundary drawn in water. The Seahawk moves closer. At this range, the details are no longer theoretical. Crewmen are visible aboard the Iranian craft. One boat has a figure forward near a fixed mount. Another has 2 people seated low behind the windshield, their helmets dark against the early light. The boats are bouncing hard now, slamming through the chop at speed. But none of them peel away. The helicopter pilot switches frequencies and transmits. Iranian fast craft. This is a U.S. Navy helicopter operating in support of a United States naval formation. Alter course immediately. You are approaching unsafe distance. Alter course now. No reply. The Seahawk descends slightly. Not recklessly, not provocatively. Just low enough to make sure the warning cannot be missed. Rotor wash tears across the surface near the lead craft as the helicopter crosses ahead of its angle and settles into a controlling orbit. The crew chief leans into his harness, looking down through the open side, while the sensor operator locks the camera onto the boat below. Every frame is clear, every movement is recorded, every second is logged. Back on the destroyer, defensive teams are now fully at their stations. The main deck mount is trained but held in reserve. Heavy mounts cover assigned sectors. The close-in system remains in tracking standby, its white housing fixed in quiet readiness. No flashes, no smoke, no sudden action, only the disciplined stillness of a ship prepared for the next decision if the moment demands it. At 5:21, the lead Iranian boat cuts harder toward the outer screen. The destroyer responds at once, adding speed through the turn and pulling a heavier wall of wake across the approach lane. From above, the Seahawk crew can see the problem now facing the Iranian pilots. Continue straight, and they hit the turbulent water thrown off by a U.S. warship many times their size. Move wider, and they lose the angle of their approach. Slow down, and the formation begins to break apart. That is how professional naval crews stop a charge without turning the moment into something worse. They do not simply block boats, they remove choices. Aboard the helicopter, the pilot transmits again. His voice stays level. Iranian fast craft, alter course now. You are entering a restricted safety zone around a United States naval formation. Alter immediately. Again, no answer. But the Iranian boats are no longer just closing on a carrier. They are now inside a net made of angles, speed, sensors, and steel. Inside CIC, one operator watches the closest point of approach numbers fall again. Lead contact entering high alert envelope. The phrase cuts through the room harder than any raised voice could. High alert, not because anyone has acted, but because the approach is now close enough, clean enough, and aggressive enough to be treated as a serious threat if it continues. On the bridge, the captain receives the update and keeps his eyes on the horizon. Stand by, he says. Nothing more. Below the Seahawk, the lead boat drives into the destroyer's outer wake. Its bow jumps high. The hull twists. Spray bursts off both sides. For one rough second, it looks almost weightless, caught between air and water. Then it slams back down and keeps coming. Another Iranian craft drifts wider to starboard, possibly searching for a cleaner lane around the screen. The Seahawk sees it immediately. The helicopter banks hard, drops lower, and moves into the gap. It does not need to threaten. Its presence is enough. Every move is visible. Every angle is covered. Every second is being recorded. The Iranian formation begins to stretch. Not break, not yet, but stretch. The rear pair are no longer perfectly aligned with the lead boat. Their spacing widens, their timing slips. One boat keeps charging. Another hesitates over rough water before pushing forward again. The shape of the run is starting to come apart under pressure. And pressure is exactly what the U.S. Navy is applying. No dramatic flash, no sudden escalation, just the full weight of a carrier formation turning the sea itself into a barrier. At 5:22, the lead Iranian fast boat crosses into the narrowest part of the approach, the point where one more committed move could force the carrier group into a much more serious response. Inside CIC, every tracker is locked. On the destroyer, every defensive station is manned. Above them, the Seahawk circles tightly, and ahead of the carrier, 5 Iranian fast boats have entered the danger zone. At 5:22 local time, the first weakness appears in the Iranian charge, not in the boats, in the timing. From above, the Seahawk crew sees it before anyone says it aloud. The lead boat is still committed, still hammering forward through the churn, but the 4 behind it are no longer moving like a single blade. Their spacing has opened, their rhythm is off. One is riding too far left, another has dropped half a beat behind. The rear pair are beginning to fight the water instead of holding the formation. That is what pressure does. Not noise, not chaos. Pressure. The U.S. destroyer screening the carrier's flank adds speed and pulls a wider curtain of turbulence across the approach lane. It is not a collision course. It is something colder and more controlled. A calculated shaping move designed to push small, fast boats into bad water at bad angles, exactly when they need clean control the most. From the carrier's bridge, the effect is clear. The lead Iranian boat hits the outer edge of the wake, climbs hard, drops, then climbs again. Its bow kicks up for a split second, exposing more hull than waterline. Spray erupts around it in white sheets. Behind it, one trailing craft tries to hold formation and gets pushed sideways, just enough to lose its clean line. Inside the operations center, the watch team tracks the change in real time. Formation integrity degrading. Nobody celebrates. Nobody relaxes. A broken approach can still become dangerous in seconds. The Seahawk banks lower, cutting across the open side where one Iranian boat appears to be probing for a path around the destroyer's screen. The helicopter's nose swings through the lane with deliberate precision, placing itself directly in the visual center of that route. Rotor wash tears at the surface below. The message is clear even without another radio call. You do not have a free angle. You do not have a blind side. You do not have space. Still, the U.S. Navy transmits again. Iranian fast craft, you are maneuvering unsafely toward a United States naval formation. Alter course immediately. No response. But something has changed. The silence no longer feels confident. It feels strained. The lead boat tries to keep its speed, but the water ahead is no longer clean. It is broken water. Destroyer wake crossing carrier wash. Layered turbulence placed directly in the path it needs to hold. Small craft depend on speed and agility. Take away smooth water, and speed becomes instability. Agility becomes guesswork. That is the trap now. Not made of missiles, made of control. On the destroyer, crews remain steady behind their stations. The main deck gun stays trained but silent. The close-in system remains ready, tracking without escalating. Fire control systems do not push the moment any further than necessary. No one wants a single move to be misread as the beginning of something larger. The objective has not changed since the first contact appeared. Hold the line. Show the line. Make the other side decide whether they are willing to cross it. At 5:23, one of the Iranian boats on the outer edge tries. It breaks wider to starboard, angling for cleaner water outside the wake field, possibly looking for a way around the screen and closer to the carrier's open quarter. The Seahawk responds immediately. The pilot rolls into a hard, controlled bank and drops into that space, low enough to dominate the lane, steady enough to make the message impossible to miss. That route is closed. From the boat below, the helicopter must look huge. A gray U.S. Navy aircraft hovering over the exact patch of water where their opening had just been. The boat checks itself, not dramatically, just slightly. A small reduction in closing speed. But in a close maritime encounter, slight changes matter. Inside CIC, the update comes quickly. Starboard flanker slowing, then another report follows. Aft pair separating further. The swarm is no longer a swarm. Not really. It is 5 separate boats now, each facing a different part of the same problem. The U.S. Navy has taken control of the water around them, and through all of it, the carrier still has not changed course. That may be the most important detail. A U.S. aircraft carrier, one of the largest and most valuable military vessels in the world, continues moving forward through the Strait of Hormuz while 5 Iranian fast boats try to force a reaction. And the carrier does not flinch. It does not turn away. It does not give up sea room. It lets its escorts, helicopter sensors, and discipline do exactly what they were built to do. Quiet power, layered power, power that does not need to shout to be understood. The lead Iranian boat hits the wake one more time and comes down unevenly. For a split second, its bow swings offline. The driver corrects, but the correction costs speed. Behind it, another boat falls wider. A third begins to angle away. What looked only minutes earlier like a sharp, coordinated rush toward a U.S. carrier is coming apart in plain sight. Not because it was destroyed, because it was controlled. On the bridge, the captain watches through magnified glass as the lead craft loses its clean line and the others begin to drift with it. Then comes the report everyone has been waiting for. Lead contact dropping speed. A beat later, port side element turning away. That is the moment. The first real bend in the approach, the first admission, not spoken over radio but written across the water, that the pressure has reversed. Iran had moved in expecting to force a reaction from the carrier group. Instead, the U.S. Navy has done something far more powerful. Without escalating, it has taken the sea away from them. At 5:24 local time, the charge breaks. Not all at once, not dramatically, just enough for every watchstander in the U.S. formation to understand the same thing at the same time. Iran is backing off. From the Seahawk overhead, the change is unmistakable. The lead fast boat, the one that pushed hardest and longest through the destroyer's wake, is no longer holding a clean intercept line. Its bow still points toward the outer screen, but its speed is down, and its track is beginning to slide outward degree by degree. Off its port side, another boat turns wider. It is no longer pressing in, no longer trying to preserve the shape of the group. The rear pair begin opening distance. What had been one coordinated approach has become 5 separate decisions, and none of them are carrying the pressure forward anymore. Inside the Combat Information Center, the surface picture updates in real time. Lead contact reducing speed. A second later, outer elements opening bearing. Then the update everyone has been waiting for, CPA increasing. That is the shift. That is the line moving away from the carrier instead of toward it. On the bridge, nobody cheers. Nobody relaxes too early. The captain holds the same posture he has kept from the beginning. Upright, still, eyes forward. Because the Strait of Hormuz does not reward early relief. A boat turning away can turn back just as quickly. A tactical withdrawal can still be a feint. And in close maritime encounters, complacency is exactly how a small threat becomes a much larger problem. So the formation holds. The carrier keeps moving. That detail matters more than anything else. It does not turn out of the lane. It does not give up sea room. It does not slow in confusion or speed up in panic. It continues forward exactly as planned, a floating airfield pushing through one of the most tense waterways on Earth while the small craft that tried to force a reaction begin peeling away from its protective screen. That is what dominance looks like at sea. Not noise, not spectacle. Control. Below the Seahawk, the lead Iranian boat finally commits to the turn. Not a sharp break, not a dramatic retreat. Just a slow, clear bend away from the destroyer's wake and out toward the edge of the transit lane. Another boat follows, then another. Within seconds, the pattern is obvious. The remaining craft are no longer searching for a way into the carrier group. They are looking for space away from it. The Seahawk stays with them, circling low enough to keep every move under observation. The sensor turret tracks hull markings, crew posture, mounted equipment, turn angles, engine wash, everything. Every second is recorded. Every frame is logged. The radio remains open, but the helicopter barely needs to speak now. The water itself is saying what the Iranians do not. The run is over. At 5:25, the destroyer screening the carrier begins to ease its shaping maneuver. Not because the risk has vanished, but because the geometry no longer requires the same pressure. The wake field widens behind it, instead of cutting directly across the boat's path. Still, no one powers down early. Crews remain at their stations. Defensive systems stay ready. Eyes stay locked outward. Nobody treats the moment like it was harmless, because it was not. 5 Iranian fast boats had rushed toward a U.S. aircraft carrier inside a narrow strait and pushed the encounter right up to the edge of a serious response. The only reason it did not go further is because the Americans controlled every part of the moment that mattered. Spacing, speed, observation, posture, patience. Inside CIC, the tactical summary begins forming even before the boats are fully clear. All 5 contacts increasing range. No release observed. No further intercept geometry. Formation restored. The language sounds cold until you understand what it means. It means the carrier is secure. It means the escorts did their job. It means the helicopter closed the flank. It means no one had to take the next step because the pressure worked before that line was crossed. And it means the encounter that began with 5 fast boats charging out of the dawn has ended with those same boats turning away under the weight of a carrier strike group that never blinked. By 5:27, the Iranian craft are outside immediate danger distance, still visible, still tracked, but no longer controlling the situation. On the flight deck, the rhythm begins to return in careful pieces. Not normal, not yet, just controlled. Sailors move with the aftershock of tension still in their bodies. Rotor wash settles as the Seahawk turns back toward the carrier. Steel remains ready. Eyes remain outward. Nothing about the moment feels loud. That is why it feels final. Iran had come toward the carrier, expecting to create a headline, a moment of pressure, a picture of defiance in the tight waters of Hormuz. What they found instead was a U.S. Navy formation that did not panic, did not overreact, and did not surrender an inch more water than it chose to. 5 Iranian fast boats rushed a U.S. aircraft carrier in Hormuz. They thought they were forcing a reaction. What they met was something colder than raw power. They met control, and in the Strait of Hormuz, control decides who keeps moving forward and who turns away first.